Today we're going to hear the story of the shepherd and the warrior. Once upon a time, there was a great war in Israel. The armies of Israel encamped upon a mountain opposite them. On the other side, there was an immense valley. It was a vast expanse. And King Saul was troubled, because Saul didn't know what to do. He was afraid of the Philistines. Now, Jesse, who was a man of Bethlehem, had 8 sons, and he said to his youngest son David, "Hey, listen, take some parched corn and 10 loaves of bread. Run to the camp of your brothers. Find out how they are doing and bring me back some news." So David got up early in the morning before daylight. He took the food and he ran to the camp. As he came near to the armies, he could hear the shouting, the clashing of arms, the clashing of swords. And he found that the Philistines were coming down into the valley. Their champion came forward, and it was a big man. His name was Goliath. He was from a city called Gath, and it says that the spear of Goliath was like a weaver's beam. That was a very long spear, and it says that when he shouted, the hearts of the men trembled. Now, when David heard this man shouting and heard him cursing the gods of Israel, he became angry. He said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that dares to defy the armies of the living God?" Now, when his brother Eliab saw David, he asked him, "Hey, why did you come down here? Who left those sheep in the wilderness? I know what you're thinking. You want to sneak down and peek at the battle and then run back and tell everybody that you saw it? You're a coward. Don't you realize there's a battle going on here? People are getting killed. Are you crazy?" And so David was hurt. He said, "Am I not allowed to go see the battle?" And he continued, "Is there not a cause? That means, is there not a reason that I should go see the battle?" In other words, he was saying, "Don't I have a right to be here?" And he said, "What have I now done?" So he was hurt by his brother's harsh words. But something else happened that day that hurt him even more. After David listened to Goliath, the Philistine, the giant, he began to think, how can I kill this guy? And as he looked around, he saw that there weren't any weapons anywhere to be found. So he made a decision. He said, "I'm not going to get any bigger rocks. I'm just going to look for 5 smooth stones. I'm going to put them in my bag, and I'm going to use my sling." And he was a shepherd, and he used his sling to kill foxes and wolves and bears that would attack his sheep. And so he thought, maybe I can do the same thing to this giant. Well, after David found his 5 smooth stones, he ran down to meet the giant, and he said to the giant, "You come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And David raised his sling, and he let the stone fly, and he hit the giant right on top of his head. And the stone stuck in the giant's forehead, and the giant fell to the ground and died. Then the Israelites came down and defeated the Philistines. They recovered their ground again. And when Eliab saw his younger brother standing over the dead body of the giant, he couldn't believe it. He said, "Was it really you? Did you really kill Goliath?" And David answered him, "It was I. I slew the Philistine, the giant Goliath, with a sling and a stone." When Eliab realized what had happened, he understood that God had chosen David to defeat Goliath. He knew that the God of Israel was greater than the idols of the Philistines. And also, he came to understand that he had judged his brother wrongly. He knew that David wasn't proud, that he wasn't boasting. He wasn't trying to brag about going down to the battle. He was only trying to find out how his brothers were doing. He was concerned about them. Now, I don't know about you, but I like happy endings. And this story has 2. Not only did Israel win the battle, but the 2 brothers learned an important lesson. David learned that sometimes you have to face your giants. And Eliab learned that you can't judge a person by their appearance. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about the lesson that David learned. Sometimes you have to face your giants. This may mean that you have to stand up to a bully at school. It may mean that you have to say no to a friend who is asking you to do something wrong. It may mean that you have to make a decision to walk away from peer pressure. It may mean that you have to say no to a secret sin. Whatever your giant is, I hope you remember David's example. He knew that he had to do something about the giant, and so should you. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about the lesson that Eliab learned. He learned that you can't judge a person by their appearance. Many times the things that we think are really important, like our clothes or our hairstyle or our popularity or how much money we have in the bank, these things aren't what God sees when he looks at us. We need to remember that God looks at our heart. You know, when David was introduced to King Saul, the first thing that Saul noticed was his handsome appearance. He was tall and strong and handsome. And Saul said, "You are a mighty man." But David said, "I am only a boy." He knew he wasn't the strongest or the smartest or the most talented. He was just a boy who tended sheep. He was just a boy who had faith in God. You know, I hope that you remember that the next time you meet a stranger, you never know if they're a prince or a princess in disguise. You may be looking at someone who is very poor and you may have a lot of money. You may feel sorry for them and you may think that they're worthless. But you don't know that they might be better off than you are. They might have more character. They might have more faith. They might have more integrity. They might have more courage. They might have more kindness. You never know. So the next time you meet a stranger, be kind to them. Be friendly. Remember, you never know who you're dealing with. Maybe you'll meet someone who's better off than you are. You don't know? There's another truth that we see in this story. It's this: God can use anyone he wants to. He doesn't need a hero. He doesn't need a superstar. He doesn't need somebody who's strong or smart or talented. If God wants to use somebody, he can use them. You see, David was just a boy who tended sheep. But God chose David to be a great king. He chose David to write many psalms. He chose David to defeat the greatest giant in the land. David was a nobody. But you know who else was a nobody? Moses. Moses was an overlooked baby. He was almost drowned. He was raised in the palace, but he was overlooked. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. He ended up in prison. But Joseph was raised to become the ruler of Egypt. Ruth was an overlooked foreigner. She came to Bethlehem with nothing, but she became part of the family tree of Jesus Christ. The Lord doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those he calls. So if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not pretty enough, or you do not have enough friends, or you do not have enough money in the bank, I want you to remember, the Lord doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those he calls. I pray that this story will encourage you today. May you never judge a person by their appearance. May you always remember that the Lord can use anyone he wants to, and may you always be ready to face your giants. I hope you enjoyed the story of David and Goliath. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. Until next time, God bless you.